Morena, good morning. I am going to talk today about raising our voices. Not necessarily in a shouty pants kind of way, but sometimes that is necessary. You might think that I don't have too much trouble with that. I talk for a living, and if I'm not talking, I'm writing. But here's an interesting thing. Every now and then, somebody will say to me after I've said something or written something or made a show or a book or whatever it is, they'll say, "You're very brave." And my instinctive reaction to that is to think that I've done something wrong. I think that I might have been impolite or indiscreet or inappropriate or somehow unladylike. Sometimes I think I don't have a particularly good filter for knowing what is socially acceptable. Sometimes I don't think that people get scared until somebody tells them that they're brave. And that thing about not having a filter for things that are socially unacceptable, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. One of my favourite cartoonists, Michael Lunig from Australia, says, "Life is offensive and refuses to apologise." And quite often I'm very much the same. In fact, some of you might know, just recently I had a bit of back and forth with another newspaper columnist who suggested that women shouldn't swear because it doesn't suit them and it's unladylike. Now, I argued that, A, women don't swear more than anybody else, it's just that people notice it more, and I can't help anybody with that. And B, women are entitled to use all the words. And then I offered C, that maybe men could have exclusive use of all the swear words if women could have exclusive use of all the rest. It's not the first time that women have been told that what they say is wrong, or that the way that they say it is wrong, or even that their voices are wrong. One of my favourite stories from the very beginning of the feminist movement in the 1870s was from Elizabeth Stuart Phelps, who urged women in the 1870s to tear off their corsets and set fire to them. Not so that they could be skanky, but so that they could finally, for the first time, take a deep breath and say in a loud voice what they wanted. Stuff like, the right to vote and own property and other things that weren't unreasonable. But of course, over the years, various misogynists have suggested that there's something wrong with women's voices. This misogynist, for example, Margaret Thatcher, who said in a lecture in 1982 that she hated the strident sound of women's libbers' voices. And she was responded to by another Margaret, a much nicer Margaret, social anthropologist Margaret Mead, who said maybe women's voices sounded weird to us because we hadn't heard them for a long time. And maybe sometimes they're a bit shrieky and shrill because we hadn't used them for ages and ages. So, here's the thing. I think a lot of us are born chatterboxes. Am I right? Are there some people here who were born chatterboxes? And then we grow up to be shrill and strident. And then somewhere along the way we get the message that the world thinks that maybe we would be nicer people to be around if we would just shushy up a tiny bit. I can tell you that I began life as an incredibly polite child. In fact, I was so polite that I drank silverfish with my hot chocolate. I'm going to explain that because I can see you're confused. This is my grandmother, who was a glamorous and wonderful woman, and when my brother and I went to visit her, she would make us hot chocolate. She didn't have it herself, it was a special treat for us, right? And so she would make us a hot chocolate in the evening and stir the hot water into it and give it to us. It was infested with silverfish. She didn't know that, she didn't drink it. And so after a couple of minutes, all the dead silverfish would rise to the top of the hot chocolate. And I was too polite to tell her that there was something wrong with the hot chocolate. And so my brother and I would drink it every time we went to stay with her. I know, it's amazing I've turned out as well as I have. So, fortunately, of course, later on I turned into, a strident, lippy, young feminist. But then later in my 30s and 40s, as a distracted and exhausted mother, I stopped talking about what I believed. I stopped saying things out loud. I think that's a common thing. I think it happens particularly to women, but not exclusively. I think we reach a point in our lives where we stop saying what we believe. And what's wrong with losing our voices? The thing that happens is that we lose connection. We stop feeling like we are part of our community. We feel alienated and diminished and dismissed. And here's the thing, the whole meaning of life, and I know, what is it? It's 10:30. The meaning of life, ladies and gentlemen, is connection. The thing all of us most want more than anything else in the world is to not feel alone. And if we're silent, if we don't say what we believe, then we won't find the people who believe the same things as us, and we will feel alone. So how did I get my voice back? A really lovely thing happened in 2008. An old friend of mine asked me if I would like to write a weekly newspaper column. And it didn't have to be funny, which is incredibly liberating for somebody who's a comedian. It just had to be about some current social nonsense. So anything that made me angry or sad or bewildered or tickled, I could write about that every week. And it was a really interesting process for me because in the beginning, I felt like I didn't really have a right to chuck my ideas out there. And then I started hearing back from people that I was saying the same things that they were thinking. So I went from thinking I didn't have a right to express my ideas to feeling that I had a responsibility to give a voice to other people who didn't otherwise have a voice. And I discovered that doing that job as a writer and what I do as a comedian and in shows and writing books is not so much about finding an audience, but about finding a community and giving people like me a voice. It's not always easy to do that. Sometimes it takes a bit of courage. So for that, I've built a shrine. I literally have. I've built a shrine in my office to stroppy women. So in the shrine, I have pictures and figurines of Carol Burnett, Lucille Ball, a female Buddha, Mother Suzanne Aubert, Joan of Arc, Wonder Woman, Annie Oakley, and my very dear late friend, Catherine Irvine. And so when I'm writing something to stick in the newspaper or writing a book or writing a show or thinking about what to say on the radio, and I'm nervous about that, I look over my right shoulder and I see all those women who did really big and important things and made major sacrifices, and I realize that what I'm about to do is really very small, so I might as well make it count. And our ideas don't have to be perfect. And they don't even have to be right. They just have to be taken for a romp. When I was growing up in Levin, let's not talk about it, it makes me sad, I set myself a challenge in my first year of high school to read all the New Zealand books in the school library, and I did. I read both of them. And one of them was by the great New Zealand philosopher Barry Crump, who in his book, A Good Keen Man, has one character say to the other character, never tell anybody you don't know how to do something, because by the time they've worked out you didn't know how to do it, you will have worked out how to do it. I've built my whole life on that, ladies and gentlemen. Just chuck those ideas out there, and women especially, say yes more often. Just give it a crack more often. No one's going to work out you didn't know how to do it until you've worked out how to do it. So I'm a nana now. When I say I'm a nana, I don't mean I drive long distances with my indicator on when I'm not actually turning. Or that I think Paul Henry is edgy. What I mean when I say I'm a nana is that I am a grandmother. My daughter has a daughter. And, some people say very kindly I look too young to be a grandmother. I like to point out, well, I'm from Levin, so technically I could be 28. So my granddaughter, Ariana Rose, is a chatterbox. She's almost 2, and she's a chatterbox. And I'm going to encourage her to grow up to be strident and lippy, or forceful and persuasive, which are words that mean the same thing. And I'm going to tell her lots of stories. One of the stories I'm going to tell her is about Alice Walker, who says that every now and then, on a regular basis, all of us need to say to ourselves, I have the right to be this self. And I'm going to tell her about Leonard Cohen, the poet and songwriter, who said, the world conspires to silence us, so that by the time we've turned 50, we've either stopped talking or started shouting. And I'm going to explain to my granddaughter that that's why nanas started shouting. And I hope it never happens, but if she has to, I hope that Ariana will be able to say to me sometime, Nana, there's something not quite right about my hot chocolate. Thank you.